Chapter 10, Part 2. The title of the chapter is Yo Romeo. Bob and Mr. Ramsey walked onto the stage to wild applause. They bowed and joked and did the yada 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 about how happy they were that we were finally ready to start rehearsals of the greatest musical they'd ever collaborated on, which was based on the tragedy written by Shakespeare, the greatest playwright who ever lived, and how Yo Romeo was going to be the most amazing show the school had ever seen. Bob began telling us about Romeo and Juliet, the Shakespeare play, based from Shakespeare. There you go. The story was about a boy, Romeo, and a girl, Juliet, who fell in love even though their families were sworn enemies. They sneaked off and got married in secret. Then there was a lot of fighting, and Romeo accidentally killed one of Juliet's cousins and was kicked out of town. A friar, which is like a priest, gave Juliet a potion that made her seem dead so she could stop her wedding to some other dude her parents wanted her to marry. When Romeo found her, he thought she was really dead, so he killed himself. When Juliet woke up, she was so depressed that she killed herself with Romeo's knife. The story is seriously cray-cray. Just before we were about to zone out listening to Bob talk about the Shakespeare play, he switched gears by explaining our musical is very loosely, based on Shakespeare's play. Yo Romeo takes place in the 1990s. That got a huge response from the cast because we were all obsessed with how funny things were back when our parents were young. I spent hours laughing with Mom and Dada, looking through photo albums that had pictures of Dada with bleached hair, thick, ropey gold chains around his neck, and a leather 8-ball jacket. Some were of Mom at school wearing baggy overalls and platform sneakers, and there was one of her going to a party dressed like a Spice Girl. OMGZ. Hilarious. Our attention revived. Bob continued. Romeo is a rocker like Bruce Springsteen, and Juliet is a pop star, a cross between Mariah Carey and Beyonce. I gasped. I would be playing a part based partially on my favorite singer. I sat up in my seat with excitement filling me up the way soda fountain fills a cup at Mickey D's. The way a soda fountain fills a cup at Mickey D's. Romeo and Juliet are both signed with rival record companies run by their families. They fall in love and secretly record some songs together even though their families forbid it. The head of Romeo's record company hears about this and thinking recording with a pop star will turn Romeo's hard rock fan base against him and hurt his record sales, so he starts a rumor online that Juliet is dead. Romeo believes the rumor, but this is a middle school production and we can't have our stars committing suicide. So before Romeo swallows some poison, he gets a text from Juliet. The text tells him to meet her at the airport where she's hired a private plane that flies them off to live happily ever after. But the plane goes down in the Bermuda Triangle and they're never seen again. Their families get together to lament the loss of their children and agree to release the secret recordings Romeo and Juliet made, which become huge hits and that make our star-crossed lovers live on forever. While listening to the story, I realized I'd never even thought about who was going to play Romeo, the boy I'd have to pretend to be in love with and maybe even kiss. OMGZ, I was definitely not into kissing for the very first time while a bunch of people watched. Bob began calling the cast on stage. First, he announced members of the chorus who went up on stage one by one to applause. Then he announced the supporting cast. Izzy was cast as Juliet's agent, who secretly helps her get to the recording studio with Romeo, sort of like the nurse in the Shakespeare original. Bob called me up on stage. The cast applauded wildly. I must admit it felt kind of good that they were excited about welcoming me into their world. As long as they were on my side, I got the feeling being in a play wouldn't be so bad. The only ones left in the seats were students we called the downbeats. They usually played in the orchestra and marching band. Finally, Bob called for T.J. Gatt to come to the stage. TJ was tall and lanky with a kind of intense face. I didn't know him personally at all, but I'd heard about him. He was a grade ahead of me, and he was the lead singer and guitar player of a rock band called the African Americans. All the band members, two guys, one who played the keyboard and one who played bass, and a girl drummer named Natsuko, were biracial. TJ was black and Italian, Natsuko was Japanese and Puerto Rican. I wasn't sure about the other two guys, but I guess they were a pretty good group because they played at a lot of parties and festivals and no one heckled or threw things at them. TJ was a quiet guy, sort of a loner who only hung out with his band and never said much of anything to anyone. The fact that he tried out for the play was a huge surprise, which Bob quickly cleared up. We had to chase this guy down to get him to audition in private, but we wanted someone we knew could rock out and act. And in TJ, I know we found our man. All the kids, including me, applauded as TJ loped up to the stage wearing dark glasses that hid his eyes, a t-shirt, torn jeans, and a leather jacket that was pretty beat up, but in a cool way. He had frizzy black hair that he wore in a mohawk. He stood next to me, and I had to look way up to see his face. He didn't turn to me to smile or anything, so I turned away from him, wondering what I'd gotten myself into. Would I really have to pretend to be in love with this scary guy? Would I have to kiss him? Mr. Ramsey and Bob handed us our scripts. I knew that as soon as I got home, I would scan through the pages to make sure I didn't have any kissing scenes with TJ. If I did, I'd have to Google dying of embarrassment to see if it were a real possibility. I was walking with Izzy as everyone headed out of the auditorium when Mr. Ramsey called for TJ and me to stay behind. Izzy closed her eyes and shimmied as if she had swallowed the best ice cream ever. You are so crazy lucky. You get to fall in love with TJ. He's so cute. Not like ordinary cute, but kind of scary, weird cute. Know what I mean? Anyway, I'll call you about the movie at my house tomorrow. See ya. She hurried out of the auditorium, leaving me alone with TJ while Mr. Ramsey went to get something from his office. TJ was sitting on the edge of the stage, so I went down the aisle and sat across from him in the front row. As far as I could tell, he wasn't looking at me from behind his dark glasses, so I didn't look at him, even though I wanted to see what he really looked like. It's bizarro, I know, but until I get into a situation with people, like in the same class or assigned to a study group, I didn't really notice much about them. It's like when you go to the movies, you watch the stars, not the people sitting in the background drinking coffee or walking by on the street. So I had never really taken a good look at TJ before. He'd been a background person in my life until today. Mr. Ramsey returned with 2 large envelopes and handed one to each of us. You both got great challenging solos and duets, so we're going to be seeing a lot of each other over the next 7 weeks. He turned to me and said, with a voice like yours, do you read? I smirked. Of course I read. Great. That'll make our lives a lot easier. Take some time this weekend to go over the music. We'll have our first private rehearsal Monday after school. He gave a sort of stiff salute and took off, leaving TJ and me alone in the auditorium together. I was about to leave when TJ jumped down from the stage and headed toward me. He stopped right in front of me and said, hi. I said, hi. He said, nice to meet you. Nice to meet you too. We stood surrounded by an awkward silence for what seemed like forever before he said, did you know the smallest monkey in the world is about as tall as a toothbrush? I stared at him a moment and then shook my head and said, what? He looked at his boots, shrugged, and said, right, okay, then see ya. And he took off up the aisle and out of the auditorium, leaving me completely confused.com. What just happened? What did toothbrush-sized monkeys have to do with anything? Was he trying to say I was short or looked like a freaky monkey? I decided to sit right back down where I was, skim the script, and make sure I had no kissing scenes with Mr. Scary Weird Cute.
Shakespeare!